Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. I'm Pete Tigus. This is a special one for me. It's the 1st of March. Emma and I have made the really short drive to our home river. We're fishing. It feels like forever since I've actually put some waders on and cast a fly rod. Like many other people, I've missed fishing dreadfully, and it's really special to be back on my home river, the Taw, and making a few casts for salmon. We don't open for trout just yet. That's on the 15th of March. But today is open day for the salmon season, so we thought we'd go down and mark the occasion. It's a slightly different one, because what we usually do is go to the local hotel, the Fox and Hounds, and have breakfast, and then hit the river. We've got, as always, our dog Monty with us, the Fly Culture mascot. We're going to make a few casts. I'm going to hopefully talk you through how we're going to be fishing this morning and what we're going to be doing. So I hope you enjoy this slightly different podcast. So we walked a short way upstream. Emma's got the season underway. She's casting straight away beautifully across the pool. So you can picture the pool. This pool's called Island Pool, and a little bit further up there's a small island, but the tail of it is a really good spot to fish. If fish are running up, they've got to come through the pool below, and they tend to rest down there. It's also a really, really good pool for trout as well, and when they start rising, they hug that far side. It's pretty deep. It's about 4-5 feet deep. And we've had some nice trout out of there as well when they're rising, so I'll be really looking forward to casting a dry fly there. One of the things for me is when I hit the river for the first time, after particularly these wet winters that we've been having, is to see if there's been much by way of erosion, if there's trees down in the river. And it looks as though so far we've got away relatively scot-free, which is cool, and it's part of that start of that season for me as well, seeing those sorts of things. And you think about when the rain's falling, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to the banks. Are they going to be eroded? And Himalayan balsam's an issue down here. We've worked really hard, particularly Emma, in trying our best to eradicate it by just pulling it whenever we see it. And I think that's had something to do with it this year as well, and the last year, that erosion hasn't been such a big issue. The river here, we call this, it's sort of middle to lower Taw. The river here, we've got this pool particularly, Island Pool, is a pretty even pace with the bias across the far side. So we're standing on true left bank as you look down and casting to the right side there. And there's a pretty even, uniform flow. I'm watching Emma cast down there now, and just the fly swing really nicely. Visibility is pretty good. It feels pretty cold. The temperature, it said it was like 4 degrees, but there's a nasty breeze that's making it feel a lot cooler than it actually is, but just so nice to be out on the river. You know, we've missed it so much, and I think about it so much, and I'm sure if you're listening you probably feel the same. And it is, you know, I'm old enough to know better, but still just being so excited about being back on the river again. The place I love, my home water, is a pretty special moment, and yeah, it's just great to have it underway. So Emma's getting towards the hot spot of the pool, which is towards the tail, and the pool below the river drops a little bit, and the water's, it's a lovely broken riffly water, and the fish often when they come up through will sit against the far side. Like I say, we're fishing standing on the true left bank, and Emma's sort of casting towards the far bank. It's a cast, it's not a big cast, you know, it's not a big river. It's about, I don't know, 50-60 foot cast, if that, to get across to swing the fly around to where the taking spot can be. We've been lucky with salmon here, and we had a spell. It was a tough year for us last year, and I think I've said on previous podcasts, Emma and I, despite putting the hours in, and we felt we fished pretty well as well, just finished the season with 1 salmon each, which we were really pleased with. You know, it's not the sort of numbers where you're going to get huge numbers every year, but it was really pleasing to see that. And my one was actually from the next pool, and I'll describe that. And I think Emma's was from the very spot that she's fishing now that I remember in Island Pool here. Like I say, it's a lovely even flow, even pace. There's a tree comes across in one spot almost halfway across the river, so you have to be careful about how you cast there. Our setups, Emma's fishing a 12-foot 7-weight rod, it's double hander. She's got a Scandi 3D, which has got an S3 tip and then intermediate and then a floating section, I think, which allows her to get down. She's got a relatively heavy fly on as well, and that usually is pretty good for us for early season. I'm fishing a Versi tip, so I've got sort of a floating section, then I've got 10 foot of fast sinking tip on there, and I think it's a collie dog actually. I can't remember what I tied on now, I've left my rod back, but I think it's a collie dog, something along those lines, something big. Water clarity, like I said before though, was pretty good, so I'm really hopeful that the fish, if there are any in the system, get a good look at it, and I'm really excited about the state of the river and how it's looking. Like I say, it does feel a little bit cool at the moment. I've not taken water temperatures. I've got a thermometer in my waders, I always check that, so I'm going to do that at some stage, but just feels like a shot in the arm being back. That somewhere so special for me, so I'll keep you posted as well. But Emma's working down there, she's really in that hot spot at the moment. She's casting fantastic. The thing I love about fishing with Emma is she just enjoys it for what it is. She doesn't take it too seriously. She's not poring over videos and everything else, practicing her casting. She just turns up at the river, goes with her gut, ties on what she feels is appropriate for the conditions, and just enjoys it. And genuinely, I know so many of us sort of say, oh, fish would be a nice bonus, but I'm not bothered. She really isn't bothered. She loves the casting aspect of it, and the fish become a happy byproduct of that. That having been said, when she does lock into something, I remember so many times that she shows me her hand afterwards and it's shaking with excitement. So that's what this fish does for her, and she doesn't trout fish, and that's the really cool thing, that the salmon fishing, although I'm lucky to salmon fish with many good friends, it's the thing we do together, and she's the person I fish with most. She's just good company on the river, and just enjoys it for exactly what it is. So I followed Emma down the pool, down Island Pool, and then we've gone through Washing Pit. Washing Pit is probably one of my favourite pools. It sort of runs, like I described earlier, more riffly broken water, fishes the fly really well. The pool fishes really more so from middle to far right side, but swings around beautifully. There's a willow tree that sort of over the years has been pushed down. It's a relatively short one, and the base of it's pretty flat, and the dog likes actually walking along it and can watch us fish from there, but I think he thinks the water's too cold today, so he's not got into it. But usually if you're stepping around that spot, that usually is where, if any magic's going to happen, it tends to be there. The salmon I caught from Washing Pit last year, though, it was in July and the water was pretty low. So what I did was, walking down the next pool into that pool, tied on a heavier fly and just let it swing over the lip of the pool, and the grills took it straight away. So I was really lucky from that point of view. And yeah, we're continuing to fish down the pool. Everything looks right, everything feels good, but just being out on the water is just a real treat at the moment. So we both fished the first two pools. It's been really good fun. We've just got out now to warm our hands and our feet up a little bit, and then we're going to walk downstream a little bit and fish perhaps one or two more pools. But Em, how does it feel to be back on the river again?
It's magical. It's always so lovely the first day. Coming this year more than ever, it's so special, and the dog here is just in his element. He loves it, and just to be by the water is just wonderful.
And the casting looked pretty cool as well. You went straight into the zone straight away, didn't you?
Yes, I've lost one fly, which is my sort of that I always have to do that, don't I? But it's been fun starting to practice my singles play. So hopefully that's something this season that will get better and better.
Well, it's looking really good already. So, yeah, we're going to have a wander downstream and try a couple more pools, I think. So we made this short walk downstream. We're fishing 4 Acres pool now at the moment, and it's one of my favourites. It's consistently beaten me up from a salmon point of view, but from a trout point of view, it's been pretty good to me. And I remember the very, very first time I fished the water, and I was fishing for trout. It was in May time, the water was pretty low, and Emma had come down with the dog, and I said, just before we leave, I'm just going to flip a duo into this little pot and see what happens. And the dry dipped, I struck, and I thought I'd hooked salmon. Actually, it was quite a strong fish, and when we netted it, I just got one of those new weigh nets. I'm not into really keeping detailed numbers and sizes of fish and everything, but we happened to weigh it, and it was 2.5 pounds, which for West Country standards is a special fish. And it's gone on to, for me, this stretch of river where I fish. I remember in a podcast I did with Paul Proctor that we were chatting about the trout fishing, and we were going fishing afterwards, and I said to him I saw a really nice fish rise, and we went down to the river, and probably, I don't know, 5-10 feet away, if that, from where I'd seen the rise the day before, that he caught a fish that was £2.13, I think it was. He weighed that. It was absolutely stunning fish. I've gone on to catch fish of that sort of size and even bigger still. And it just goes to show, I think sometimes people are unfairly and incorrectly a bit dismissive of the size of fish in Devon. And if you know where to look, well, first of all, don't believe them, but if you know where to look, sometimes you might get lucky. And, you know, I forgot to mention earlier when we were in Island Pool and Emma and I were fishing, and it wasn't just quite right. I think I mentioned this again in the podcast with Paul, that I'd been fishing for salmon. It didn't feel like it was going to happen, and it was a bit too high to throw a duo, dries, or whatever it might be. So I said to her, I'm just going to go and pull a streamer for a bit and see what happens. And lo and behold, I had a trout there, and again, we thought it was a grilse, and it weighed. We only had a salmon net there that Emma managed to grab, and we weighed that one, and that was over £4, which again is phenomenal. And it wasn't one of these sort of fish that looked as though it was all head and a tiny little body. It was just in the peak condition and looked absolutely fantastic. And I've had friends be astounded by the quality of the trout fishing as well. So that's the added bonus. You know, I find I'm spending a little bit more time now fishing for salmon early in the season, because on the home river here on the tour, there isn't really a lot happening when we open for trout on the 15th. There doesn't tend to be a lot going on. And it tends to be, for me, when the granums start hatching, and certainly on this river, it tends to be early April into the first week and a half of April that the hatch really starts to peak, and that's when I'm starting to see rising fish, and that's when I like to target those rising fish. So I'm finding more so that I'm fishing for salmon up until then, unless, you know, we get warmer conditions and it looks as though perhaps we will get some rising fish. But generally speaking, that's what I'm tending to look for. So and if I'm going to trout fish, I tend to go further up the system. I find I belong to a club further up the river, and I find that's a better place to look for trout early on if I want to do it. Small stream there, fishing small little rods, and I'm generally fishing a duo there early season. That tends to fish just fine for me, and I can find fish that way. So that's what I tend to do. So it's interesting, even while I'm talking about this now, that how I'm thinking about my fishing now in a slightly different way. So I'm really prepared to wait for those right moments rather than just go for it from the outset. And sometimes, I don't know if you're the same on your home water, when I fished early season, or when I was guiding, if I was guiding people early season, that you'd sometimes think, wow, you'd be earning your money to find those fish for people, but you think, wow, where have all the trout gone? And then all of a sudden it starts to happen. So I'm really looking forward to those moments too. But just today, breeze has come up a little bit. It looked as though it's great conditions in the sense that there's no sun out. It's overcast. It felt as though pressure may have just come up a little bit. And you just never know. And that's the fun of salmon for me, is fishing for something. Is it going to turn up? Isn't it? More often than not, it's not going to. And as I've said many times before on these podcasts as well, that we don't get a lot of fish on this river. 300 in a season for the total river is a big year for us, or a good year, I should say, really. So it's just about spending time with like-minded people, with people who feel the same as you do, and it's just not about those numbers. It's just about enjoying those moments on the river. So I was talking about the trout on 4 Acres Pool, but I always remember the first year we fished here that Emma was fishing down here and hooked into a fish, and it was one of those really epic battles that you never tend to forget, that we ended up chasing it down the pool, and I managed to net it in the end. We were just discussing, because we couldn't remember if I'd freed it, if she was fishing a dropper and it got stuck in some weed. We can't quite remember now. It's just a fish I remember. I remember the photograph really well that we took subsequently. But it was one of those fish that you think, wow. And it came in, we weighed it in the weigh net, and it was 16 pound and was a really memorable fish. It was September. It was, again, one of those ones where you felt there was a chance, that the conditions were really good. And you probably hear in the background now the birds are starting to sing. And I know I just previously said that it feels as though pressure's just come up, and perhaps things may start to happen for us. But I was just reliving that fish and remember it so well. But it was a pretty epic battle, wasn't it, Em?
It was, yeah. I remember the take, and sort of quite often here the takes I get are fairly gentle, and you always say, is it a salmon? And I always say, oh, it feels like a trout, and I never trust that it's going to be a salmon. But this one was just extraordinary. And I think I was fishing with a dropper, and the dropper got caught on some weed, and I know you had to go wading out with the net to try and jab the hook out of the weed, which you successfully did, and the fish luckily stayed on. And yeah, we were just like, walking downstream and hoping that it would tire, and it did.
Yeah, it was one of those special ones. But conditions, like I was just saying, it definitely feels better now, doesn't it? It feels as though the temperatures come up a tiny bit. We're coming into lunchtime, so it's hardly surprising. But it feels as though it's a lot better now, doesn't it?
Oh, it's glorious. The sun's trying very, very hard to come through. There's daffodils covering the opposite bank, which is just so lovely. We've got pheasants flying over the river every couple of minutes, which is very exciting, seeing them try to make it across, which they all have so far. But yeah, it's just gorgeous, just lovely.
And I saw you were eyeing up the wild garlic that's starting to poke through as well.
Yes, we're going to take a big bag of that home and make some pesto and other bits and pieces.
Fantastic. It's funny, really. I was thinking about what I said earlier about the trout fishing and the salmon that Emma caught, or one of the salmon Emma's caught over the years. And it's funny, when you come back to somewhere you know so well, it reignites memories. Nearly every single one of them happy. And it was funny, I was talking about the willow tree on its side that our dog Monty likes walking along, and I've just come back down Washing Pit Pool, and he's rediscovered that and remembered that and had a walk along there. And he obviously doesn't fancy getting in the river today. He doesn't swim. He's a really, really good fishing dog, and he'll get excited if we hook into a fish, but knows pretty much what the drill is. But he hasn't even walked down the pool. Sometimes he'll walk down the pool with me and enjoy the whole experience. But I think the water's probably a bit cold for him. But yeah, remembering those moments with people is really, really special. And there's so many people come and fish with me that I've had so many good days with, memorable days for all the right reasons, and they may not be marked by the fish we caught. It may have been the laughs we've had, or just the experience sitting down and talking about life in general. And that's a big part of it for me, and I think that comes across hopefully in the magazine about how we feel about fishing, and it is that bigger picture. And yeah, I look forward to, when conditions allow it, being able to share the water with friends again, and I'm really looking forward to those moments. And as we walked back upstream, we saw the beat above, that somebody's bright red Land Rover was a lovely stark contrast to everything, as they're probably fishing upstream now and probably just as excited as we are about the day and experiencing that day. And we'll see what happens, and we're going to fish a couple more pools. But do you know what? I feel as though I've marked the occasion. I've enjoyed the casting as well, and I'd ripped both my rotator cuffs in my shoulders, and it's taken quite a long time to get over them. I guess these things do as you get older, and I've sort of modified my casting a little bit, and I'd been practicing a little bit of it in the garden and seeing how I could make it work for me. And I'm really pleased with how that's worked, using that slightly longer rod. I usually use 11 or 12 foot rods here, and it's a 13'7" weight, and that seems to work really, really well. And I've concentrated or thought about what I'm doing, and it's interesting, my shoulders don't feel sore. We're not fishing hard, Emma and I. We just enjoy, I guess we do fish it hard, but it doesn't feel like it. We just enjoy the experience, chat, watch each other fish the pool, remark on a good cast, all those silly little things that go with making a day so special. But it's funny coming back to somewhere and it reigniting all those very happy memories that we've had here. Well, I think we've given it a really good go. Do you think it's probably time to head back now?
Definitely. It's blown a few cobwebs away, which is fabulous. Just nice being out, wasn't it?
Not half. Do you feel as though, it's interesting, I was just talking earlier, and I was sort of reminiscing about times I'd spent with people down here. Do you sort of, when you come back here, do you think that way, or you're just in a zone in a different way, that you're enjoying the casting and the fishing? Because I think that's one of the things with salmon fishing, that you can sit and just think about stuff, can't you? And I find I clear my head really, really easily doing that, waiting obviously for that moment. But with similar sort of things going through your mind while you were fishing down the pools?
Oh, it's definitely good for the soul, isn't it? That you don't think of anything else. You're just in the zone. With me, I've said before, but I just want to try and get nice casts out the whole time. And today I caught one tree, lost one fly, didn't get any knots, so hugely successful morning.
Well, you look like you stepped into it really quickly, which is really, really cool as well. And we've done a thing last year that was kind of interesting, that we started using walkie-talkies so that we could fish and rest pools in between, because we tend to follow each other down a pool, give plenty of room, and sometimes either I or Emma will sit in a chair and watch the other person fish down a few pools. But we used walkie-talkies last year, and it's kind of cool. It's not in a geeky sort of way. I think a lot of it is that we like being there for each other if one of us is lucky enough to catch a fish. And it's kind of cool to be able to net a fish for your fishing partner as well. And we didn't take them today. We just thought, well, sorry, let's just have a nice relaxed fish down and see how it goes. But the walkie-talkie thing's kind of cool idea, wasn't it?
It was really, really good. And actually, I think it allowed us to rest more as well, because you'd sort of go off, do your own thing, come back, sit and watch the other person. And it was, and independence for me, which was really cool.
Yeah, no, well, as I said, we didn't bring them today, and perhaps we will next time. Who knows what will happen? Part of it is sometimes we get out some chairs and sit down, and, we might bring lunch if we're down for a long session or evening session or whatever. And that's the fun of it, is that there's no fixed routine with it. Everything happens as it happens. We watch the water heights. The water is, a really nice height. It's 0.7 odd at the moment, and we fished it as high as 1.2. and managed to catch some fish. We had to stand on the bank to be able to fish. But it's interesting, I meant to say earlier as well about Taw salmon, in that we don't really see them. They don't show, certainly on this beat. There's one spot in the Taw on the Fox and Hounds water where I knew that we'd see fish, and we've caught fish as they've sort of come into the pool in the past. But it's been... You don't really see them, but I was thinking of one of the times we came down, again reminiscing, we came down last year, and the river was big and we could only really fish one spot, but we saw a pod of sizable fish porpoising through, and that was really exciting, wasn't it?
It was really exciting, yeah, because you just never ever see them here. So, and I think we saw them actually in two pools. I saw them down on 4 acres as well as the one here. So yeah, it was nice because I don't think we've been terribly successful either. So it's nice to know that they're there.
Absolutely, and that's part of the fun of it, is, like Em says, knowing they're there. We did have one amazing day last year that our daughter came down, and I've talked before about how she used to, she's grown up obviously around fishing, but she came down with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was absolutely transfixed by it. And it was one of those magical moments. So I was sort of back in guide stroke instructor mode, and I was showing Ash how to spay cast along with our daughter as well, Charlie. And Emma was fishing in Washing Pit and hooked 2 fish, and we couldn't believe that. For us is, and usually when Em hooks them they stay hooked as well, but they both came off. But it was super exciting, and it was just one of those moments where you felt, wow, somebody who's picked up a salmon rod for the first time and had a go, this could happen for them. And part of it sometimes is that you think, yeah, would be a really nice way to get them into it, but also part of that process is earning those fish as well. But that was a really special day, wasn't it?
It was, and you could almost feel that it was that in the air there was something, the pressure, that we were so confident that we were, every cast we were thinking, yeah. And then when we both, you hooked one too, didn't you? And when that happened, it was just, yeah, we're right. It's all very exciting.
And it's great that Charlie's boyfriend Ash is getting into it as well. So I hope we'll have them back down at some stage, usually as well for my birthday, that if we're allowed, I don't know that it will happen, but if Charlie's allowed down, we usually spend the day on the river somewhere or other. We had a memorable birthday actually once, that I had a brand new rod that we took down, and our dog was very, very young and picked up the rod that I put down for a couple of seconds and ran with it, got caught with the fly line, and the tip popped. Which was kind of an interesting one. I thankfully had another rod and managed to get it all organised under warranty and everything, but that was quite a memorable one actually. Do you remember that, Em?
I do, yes. You were quite calm under the circumstances, I think.
I think I did really, really well, given that actually it was broken in 2 places. And it was one of those classic ones that I could say, send in a letter. It's like one of those old homework things where you said the dog ate my homework, but the dog ate my rod, and it literally did. So I think we're going to head back now. This has been a really fun one to share with you. And I hope if you are able to get out that you're doing so safely. If you're not, hang in there. It's not going to be too long. And I hope this podcast has helped in some small way in taking you to the river. It made me think again of one of the introductions I wrote for Fly Culture. And it simply said, it's only when you're unable to do something that you truly learn what it really means to you. And being able to come here today has been really fantastic. I feel really lucky that I have a river nearby. You may say that's a fluke, it's not. But I feel really lucky to be able to be back on the river that I love so much. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been great to have you as a guest on the podcast too.
I didn't want to be, but here we go.
Well, you've done really, really well, and you fish fantastically. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, everyone, and there'll be plenty more as always. Thanks very much indeed for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.